Hello and welcome to Saurabh Sir's classes. We will discuss a very interesting topic today, which is on ethical situations. Now, what do we mean by the term ethics? Ethics is a set of value principles. Which means what? Which means these are principles which are based on what is right versus what is wrong. And this is something which we are taught right from a childhood in various forms, in various ways, and these are related to certain basic characteristics that we all possess. Honesty, that means truthfulness, fairness, which is about justice, and loyalty, which is about being absolutely loyal to someone, and that someone can be your friend, your wife, or your office. And all ethical situations basically deal with these two things: what is right versus what is wrong. And it can relate to truthfulness, it can relate to being fair or just, it can relate to loyalty. So these are the basic elements of ethics. Now, in most organizations, we have principles of work ethics, which clearly defines all these elements that we discussed. And everyone is supposed to follow this set of principles. And these are non-negotiable, which means you cannot violate any of them. And the punishment for violation is often very, very strong, very harsh. You might lose your job, or you might be denied of a promotion, or you might get suspended, any of those. So these are very strong values that everyone is supposed to follow. And what happens if you encounter a situation where someone is not following it? What do you do? So suppose you are working in a company and you notice that one of the purchase managers is offering a bribe or taking a bribe. Which means that he's doing an act which is against the principle of work ethics, which is not right. Now, you are a new employee and you notice this. So what will you do? The first thing that you should do in these kind of situations is to inform your boss, because your boss is your guide or mentor, and he is like your father in the organization. So if you encounter any such situations, including one that is directly related to you, you should always talk to your boss first. Now, what happens if the boss is not responsive, or he is siding with the wrong? That means he is supporting the wrong. Then you talk to the HR manager. So it should be in this order. And in some cases, if you don't get the HR manager, you can talk to your boss's boss. But this will come only if the HR manager is not available or he is not responding. So this is the way that you should encounter these situations in office. Now, there are situations, especially in the corporate environment, where it is not very straightforward. That means the difference between wrong and right is not very clear. So it is very confusing. Let's take an example. Suppose you're working as a project manager and you need some employees or contractors, and one of your relatives is a contract labor provider. Now this is the situation, and what will you do as a project manager? Should you go to your relative? He can give labors quickly, and he can give you the skills that you want. All of that is fine, but is this an ethical situation? The answer is yes, because people outside may perceive that you have a vested interest in going to your relative, and there can be some kind of a monetary dealing between the two of you. So it is a situation which is called conflict of interest. That means your interest is to ensure that the project is completed on time, and your relative's interest is to gain profit from his business. Now, because you are an employee, you have a connection with your relative and you have a connection with your job, and therefore you have a conflict of interest, because his interest of making a profit clashes with your interest of getting the project completed. So this is a situation which has a conflict of interest, and therefore in these kind of situations you should always tell your boss that this is how it is. I am in a situation where I need people, and one of my relatives is a contract labor supplier and he can fulfill my requirements. However, is it okay if I sign a contract with him? And if your boss evaluates the situation and gives you the permission to go ahead, then it is fine. But if he decides that there could be a clash of interest or a needle of suspicion at your intent, even though your intent is correct, so he might tell you that please explore other suppliers. So in these situations, please consult your boss and then take a decision. Let us consider another situation. Now, you're working in a company where you are a consultant and you're providing consulting services to your client, and you decide to do a freelancing as a consultant yourself in that same space. Suppose you're a finance consultant you provide financial consulting to your clients, and you decide to use your knowledge to do freelancing yourself. And the question is this ethical? Again, there's a conflict of interest. Why? Because you are being paid by the client for your services which you are offering to him, and you are bound by your loyalty to the company, and your company will decide whether they are okay for you to share that knowledge or use that knowledge to earn your own benefits. So the conflict of interest is that you are sharing the same knowledge with the client of your company and the client that you are servicing as a freelancer. So this is the conflict of interest here. And in this case also, the best thing to do is to talk to your boss and even HR, because it is related to the company's policies. So you have to talk to both your boss as well as the HR and get their permission as to whether they are okay with your freelancing. In some cases, they might agree, saying that, okay, fine, you can do so, but within some constraints which they will tell you. In certain cases, they will say, no, you cannot do this. So you cannot take a decision to freelance without their consent, especially in cases where in your appointment letter it is very clearly written that you cannot be engaged in any other activities which will earn money for you. So be very careful about these situations. Talk to your boss or HR, get their consent, and then depending on that you can go ahead with your freelancing or not. Let us give you another example. Now suppose you are working in a company and you have a relationship with a supplier. You are working as a purchase manager or a purchasing guy, and you have a relationship with a supplier, and on the occasion of Diwali the supplier gives you a expensive gift. Now the question is whether you should accept the gift or not. Again, the same rule applies, that this is probably a conflict of interest because you are dealing with this person and he is giving you something, so therefore it can be assumed that he wants some benefit out of it, which may not be true, but people might think in that manner. So there could be a conflict of interest because you are dealing with him as a supplier. So what do? You talk to your boss. Again, tell him very clearly that I'm getting a gift like this, is it okay if I accept it? If he says yes, then you can go ahead and accept it. However, in certain cases, like if he's giving you a small box of sweets, some sweets, now that is not perceived as a conflict of interest because the amount is very small. Or if he gives you a small pen, not expensive, then it is okay. Normally, people will not mind in these cases. So there's a very fine line that distinguishes the conflict of interest from a normal situation. So in a sense, what are the rules of ethical corporate behavior? Number one, talk to your boss. Whenever you face a situation which has some element of doubt, or which might be construed as a conflict of interest or as something which is not correct as per the company rules or in the interest of your company, please talk to your boss. Now, if there is some element of doubt after that discussion or confusion, or your boss is telling you something which you are not convinced with, and he is not agreeing to budge, so there is still an element of suspicion, so then go to the HR, or in certain cases to your boss's boss, but first to the HR and then to him. And even after that, if you see that all three of them are telling you the same thing, then you just don't have a choice. Then you don't have a choice. And if all three of them are telling you something which as per you is not ethical, then you don't have a choice. You have to inform the higher authorities, like the very senior executives or the CEO. So you can do that. If you don't get satisfactory responses from these three people, and if their responses seem not to be in line with the company's ethics, then you can definitely approach the higher authorities. So this is the way that you deal with ethical situations in a corporate environment. So if you have any doubts, please get back to us. We will be more than happy to explain to you in more details.